Hello, I'm Kendall Evans, and I measured the efficacy of blended learning interventions. So I spent my internship for the past 9 months at Highlander Institute. For those of you who don't know what that is, they're a nonprofit organization, and they try to level the education playing field for all learners, which I think is what all education organizations say. So essentially, they try to do that by implementing blended learning initiatives. And then they have people go in and actually teach teachers how to integrate them into their classrooms. So after finding out that they taught teachers how to do things, I wanted to know, how do you know if it's working? So they already had something in place to measure that because they want it to be scalable. They want it to be rolled out en masse if they find that it works. So they did something called walkthrough scoring. And that's essentially where you go to schools and you monitor teachers and you grade them based on their performance and how well they're doing with rolling out the things that you taught them. So they used the priority practice tool, and that's a rubric that I'll go on to show in the next slide. And it is essentially pretty extensive and it's hard to memorize, which is one of its faults, but it makes sure that people are really looking at all parts of what teachers are supposed to be doing and not just this subjective evaluation based on what you think is good or not. So this is the priority practice tool that I was talking about. So this is just for the first question, which is, do tasks support, are they supported by clear instructions? And there are 4 ways that you can grade the teacher, and you have to make sure that they hit all of these things in each column in order to ensure that you can give them that grade. And it's competency based, so whether or not the teacher is effective at doing these things, that's how they'll get their score. So I asked my supervisors if I could go to a school and do a walkthrough, and I actually went with Zach. He was in the UEP program, I think, last year, and the school we went to, relatively, I would say, was pretty bad based on what we saw in the classroom. None of the students listened. They were cursing the whole time, sitting on desks, on the phone, playing music. I don't understand how anyone could have learned anything in that environment. And I thought that Zach and I were on the same page, like universally, this is going really poorly. This is ones for everything. I thought we were gonna pretty much have the same outcome. And then later on, when I asked to see his, there was still a little bit of variation. So I thought that was a bit odd because to me, and using the rubric, it seemed like the teacher was not showing any evidence of mastery of the things that we wanted to see. And not that that was all the teacher's fault. Obviously, there are a lot of other factors at play that affect classroom culture. But he gave 2s in some areas, and I was like, no, I think that's a 1. So I was like, okay, let's examine what's wrong with this priority practice tool a little bit. So there are some limitations to the existing measures, and there's some room for improvement. So what I did, oh, sorry, not there yet. So basically you get centrality bias. Some people are feeling uncomfortable about giving out 4s or 1s, so they tend to cluster around 2s and 3s. And I'll show you a slide that kind of shows that. And then there's human error. Sometimes you make mistakes or forget that something was supposed to hit all points before you gave it that grade. There are also observers that are coming directly from Highlander, so whether they know it or not, they might have a vested interest to see that these programs are working. And again, subjectivity comes into play. Like I said with me and Zach, we both thought that we were judging it so effectively, and then it turns out that there was still some variation between our answers. So this bar graph is something that I worked on. I tracked the observers' scoring frequency, so it was kind of like a mean comparison test of sorts, just to see what people were giving everyone. And this one was just based on question 1A, which was just asking whether tasks are supported by clear instructions. And you see that for the most part, you're getting a lot of people giving scores of 2s and 3s. You don't really see any 1s, and you don't really see any 4s. Now, I wasn't in the classroom, so I can't say with absolute certainty that that wasn't the scores that they deserved, but that seemed to be the trend throughout all of the sections of the rubric. So I had some recommendations that might be able to help ameliorate that, and that would be to conduct frequent calibration trainings. Just having everyone in one room and making sure that we're all giving the same teacher the same score would be effective. Maybe requiring some sort of certification, just making sure that you have mastery of the priority practices tool before you're able to go in a classroom. maybe bring multiple people to one classroom, so that way you can kind of see like if the scores are comparable. You can also outsource walkthroughs to external organizations just so you kind of get rid of that internal bias. And I think that if you roll out these things, it'll account for most bias and selectivity that you're seeing. But I just want to make note that some of these might be infeasible due to budgetary constraints, the size of Highlander, and just they might not want to do it. I know that we talked about it a little bit, and they did not want to hire external people just because they felt that they had the best understanding of what they were looking for and what they wanted their teachers to execute. Thank you very much. To everybody at the Highlander office, they were all very helpful, and not just my advisors. And Zach and Karina were great, and they're both from UEP, and Danielle was also very, very helpful.